Welcome to the show. We are at Tennessee State University today with Lecrae and just have several minutes with him. I want to ask some questions. We're going to be talking about culture and faith and how those two intersect. And Lecrae, I'd love to hear your take on the influence of rap on urban culture, youth culture, and the culture as a whole. How influential, we have a lot of pastors watching. How influential is rap, do you think, in the culture as a whole, youth culture, urban culture?
Well, one thing about rap music is really, just a vocalized expression of hip hop culture. And hip hop culture is intergenerational, and not only that, it's multi-ethnic. So it's similar to sports. You can have your kid, the father, the big brother, the grandfather, all at the same game. And I think hip hop culture is very similar. So, now we've got, the LL Cool J's who are, moving into the 50s and so on and so forth and so on. So I think what it's become not only a culture that permeates all ethnicities, all racial boundaries, but it's also become a mouthpiece to influence, specifically the urban culture, right? So the urban culture sees these artists as modern day philosophers, people they take their cues from, where we learn different things from, and so it's been a huge influence.
So it impacted urban, and many folks believe urban has a bigger influence now than it has even a decade ago, because more and more people are moving to the cities. So do you think rap music is more influential now than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Well, I mean, it's now the new pop music in a lot of ways. It's in every commercial. You hear rap music everywhere. It's at every sporting event. But I think that it's still something. It has a special kind of residue to people who are really a part of hip hop culture or in the urban context. It really it's the voice that is communicating their value system and their ideals. So it's not just good music or this is my song. This is my voice. You're speaking, you're giving expression to my experiences and my desires and my ideals and my values. And so that makes it a powerful tool for good or for bad.
So we're obviously grateful that you're stepping in and influencing the culture. And we think rap, hip hop does influence culture as a whole. I mean, as a pastor in a small town in Arkansas, Cincinnati, Miami, grew up in New Orleans, a thread between them all was no matter what teenager I was working with, they all listened to rap music. Even if they were driving a truck, had camouflage on, and they'd listen to rap too.
Right.
So it does influence culture as a whole. I've heard some talks that you've done, I've seen online on kind of a theology of transforming the culture, of stepping into the culture. Love to hear your thoughts on the role of a Christian, the role of a leader on impacting the culture.
I'm a big fan of, just looking at Paul in Acts and him, in the marketplace, but in the synagogue as well. And, him mixing it up out there in the culture and knowing who their, modern day poets were and their speakers and philosophers, and being able to integrate their ideals and their values in him in his talks as he's trying to preach Christ to them. And I think it's very crucial. I think what we see a lot, specifically in Christianity in the States, is the residue of what we call Christendom, where we know Christian culture, but we don't really know the Christian Christ. And we know rules, we know don't do this and do that and do this, but we don't understand how Jesus ultimately literally transforms us so that we can be in the culture and affect it. Instead, we become separatists and say everything in the culture is bad, and so let me create another one.
Subculture.
Right, a subculture, a bubble, so to speak. And so if we had it our way, a lot of Christians would have Christian Starbucks, Christian tennis shoes, Christian everything, instead of transforming the culture that we're in. And I'm not saying that from a utopian perspective, like we're going to make the world heaven, but I'm saying we are fleshing out what God's kingdom will ultimately look like. And we are demonstrating what it looks like to end violence and crime in communities, to see, people benefiting from what redemption has done in our lives.
Yeah. So. I think last week you tweeted, people were asking you questions on Twitter, and you tweeted, and I think this kind of goes with what you're talking about. Christian is my faith, not my genre.
Yeah.
I thought it's a big statement to say, and I agree. But I'd love for you to unpack that. I mean, it's a weighty statement. It's my faith, not my genre.
And I know it goes against the grain of our cultural Christianity, and 95% of Christians are like, what? What is he saying? Because that's the way we've been conditioned.
Yeah.
But one thing I would say is we have to be careful with terms like Christian and gospel, right? Because those are bigger than genres that you can find a book or a CD in, right? Like the gospel is the power of God for salvation. It's the message of salvation. And if we limit that to just a genre of music, I think we do a disservice to what the gospel is.
Wow, that's
right?
great.
And Christian is an identifying mark. It says that I associate myself with Christ. I'm a follower of Christ. And so, you know, to call my music Christian is really storefront Christian. It's just, I'd rather you not put the tag or the label Christian on me because I say so. I'd rather it be tagged on me because my character demonstrates it, right? Because I've really been changed. And then I think culturally what the world has come to understand is that things titled Christian or titled gospel mean they're excluding me. So I'm excluded. So if you call it Christian rap, it must be for Christians. Got it. And I think that is a disservice to the missional work that we're trying to do by labeling things in such a way that only Christians can have them. I'm not mad at us creating things that edify the church specifically and are for the church. I just think as we're trying to be missional, we have to be careful about giving certain terminology and jargon to things.
That's good. Several years ago, I read, and I think this book was actually written for the music industry initially, a guy named Dick Staub. I always mess his last name up, but he wrote, it was called Too Christian, Too Pagan, T-O-O Christian, T-O-O Pagan, basically saying that if you really follow Jesus, some will say you're too Christian. The world will think you're too Christian because you have this set of values that really dictates the way you live. But then some will say, the religious will say you're too pagan because you're loving people who don't know God. You know, as Jesus, he was truth to those who didn't know him, and eventually people turned and walked away from him. But yet to the religious, he was a friend of sinners and of tax collectors. So he was simultaneously too Christian, too pagan. I've kind of wondered, being you're stepping into this culture, and do you sense that tension, being too Christian, too pagan?
Man, I live in the age of social media, and there's always somebody saying one or the other about me.
So you hear from both sides.
Absolutely, absolutely. Obviously, as far as the world is concerned, it's mostly preconceived ideas of what I'm about. So they haven't even really investigated enough to know how Christian it is or what it is that's going to happen. But there's always this sense of like, well, I know I can't, you're not gonna. And so there is that, but then on the Christian side, there's a sense of like, see, Lecrae is falling off. Lecrae he's getting worldly. And I heard him do this song, or I heard him, he's performing at this place, and then just, that's just the perspective, Jesus got it, so, what are you gonna do?
And so in that book, I concluded the only place, or the only people we find true fellowship with are those who do the same as well.
You're right.
Who are willing to be called too pagan and also to be called too Christian, but that can be a lonely spot, I imagine, sometimes.
Absolutely, it definitely is, and I've definitely had some sleepless nights and some long conversations just walking this line. Yeah. But it's comforting though, because when you're confident in the mission, I feel as if God just consistently gives you those little milestones that help you to keep going. I know for me, my music getting played on a mainstream hip hop station was big, and I actually went to the studio to go talk to the program director, and he looked at me and he said, "You know why your record is spinning on my radio station all the time? One, because it's good. Two, because I'm with you."
That's cool.
And that was like, yes, Lord, okay, I'm not out here by myself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Henry, where were you in life? when you wrote it? How did...
I was at the seminary, and that was my thesis.
Thank you.
It was a special good time in our lives because we were young and we had lots of energy, but we didn't even know we were overworked and underpaid.
I'd never heard of Henry Blackaby, did not know about experiencing God, but it was all the rage that year.
So I thought experiencing God had a profound impact on my life, so maybe it would on the inmates. Dr. Blackaby and experiencing God was the foundation and the root, I might say, the new Christianity in his prison.
Manuel Noriega was the target. Took him through experiencing God behind those cells, and then after that he started discipling me.
So the crisis was, how do we come here and help and not harm them by changing their culture?
What have you found to be the most relevant of those realities in your life, and what's been the hardest one to live out?
The love relationship. That is central to everything else. In a sense, that's the hardest one.
When God spoke, the sun and the moon came into being, and all the stars. Well, what happens when he speaks to us?
You pray about it, but faith without works is dead. So once you pray, get up, move on, and start right where you are.
It's possible to impact people around you no matter where you are.
Where you are is where God has you. And if God has you there, that's where you need to be making an impact, and that's where you need to be living life.
You just love somebody. You just love them.
Jesus exemplifies unconditional love. If you are a conduit of that unconditional love, you get the blessing.
I've seen what happens when we actually serve and love.
Unconditional love is not a one-way street. Unconditional love is given to us to do something with it.
I want to affirm that I've been listening to Gravity a lot. I love it. And the lyrics on Tell the World and We're the Lucky Ones, just some really, profound, very grace-oriented.
Thank you.
People can read those and hear those and get I think about, Luther's called it the Great Exchange, where Christ takes our sin and we take his righteousness. That is fully fleshed out in those songs.
Wow.
Some great theology there. Talk to us about who's impacted you theologically to bring to the depth of some of those lyrics, man.
Yeah, it's been like a series of people over the years. I think I kind of started with a pastor in Denton, Texas named Tommy Nelson, who was heavily influenced, and involved in, Dallas Theological Seminary. And then, from there I got into MacArthur, and then from MacArthur I got into Piper, and then from Piper I started who's influencing these guys?
Yeah.
And that's what I started wondering, where are these guys getting this information from? And so then I would dig back and go further back and further back to my DOGs, my dogs, my dead old guys, and that's when I started getting into the Spurgeons and the Calvins. And for what I do, one of my personal heroes is Francis Schaeffer. I think he just got it, he totally got being immersed in culture, affecting it, transforming it, but not losing his grip on his solid convictions on the truth of who Jesus was. And so those are some of my biggest influences. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. How do non-Christian rappers respond to it? Like the song on this album, Faking It, is, I love the song, but it call out, and not guys in particular, but the whole genre that folks have this persona that's not really legit to who they are, real to who they are?
Sure. I think there's some who respect it. You know, I think a lot of people respect that I'm willing to be authentic and willing to be real, and they're like, whoa, that's a bold move, you know, for him to say that. But I really don't feel like I have anything to lose, because I'm being authentic, and my strength is in the gospel, my strength is in the Lord to allow me to be exactly who I am. I'm sure that, there's a distaste in the mouths of some, but it's not because I'm obnoxious or because I'm not gracious. It's just because in many people's minds, they've just never seen Christ in hip hop. And so some rappers or some people in the hip hop world is just kind of like, what are you doing here? Like I know you've got to be corny or inauthentically hip hop, because we've never seen this before. But those who have gotten a taste of it, I've really had some great inroads, some great opportunities to influence. There's some albums that have come out this year that are vastly different, and I'd say it's a testament to myself and my counterparts just being involved in these guys' lives. Cool. And trying to share our hope with them, our faith with them.
So man, talk to me about Reach Records. I know it's your label. Tell me what the Lord's doing there.
Yeah, it's a label that I started with my partner Ben 10 years ago, actually, which is crazy. We have a variety of different artists. All the artists are believers, but we all have specific and different roles that we like to play within hip hop culture. And so some specifically want to use their music to edify the church, and that's their aim. Because there's a contingent of believers who, they didn't grow up listening to worship music, they didn't grow up listening to gospel music, and what they most relate to is hip hop. And these are the artists that inspire them, and this is where they can hear the truths of God and music that they enjoy. And so we're just glad to be able to create that and to have carved out that niche, because that's who we were. You know, we were people. I didn't grow up listening to gospel or CCM, and so I just couldn't relate on either side. And I loved hip hop, and thank God that there were some artists out there when I became a Christian who made hip hop music that edified me and encouraged me.
Yeah. I was sharing with Lecrae earlier that I spoke at Southeastern Seminary, 6 months or so, or a year ago, and Danny Aiken, who's the president of the seminary, godly man, but he was really excited about what the Lord's doing in rap music and hip hop. He was listening to some in his car and saying, man, listen to this part, and so I'm grateful for Reach Records, man, and how you guys are influencing the culture.
That is crazy. From the streets to the seminaries, baby.
Yeah.
It's happening.
It is. Well, we have a lot of pastors watching Lecrae that have people in their congregations and that they shepherd who are in different industries or have different crafts. Your craft, hip hop, rap, but similarly, there's doctors and lawyers and teachers and public servants, and I think you're a great example of having your craft yet stepping in as a missionary into that culture.
Absolutely.
What would you say to pastors? How can us as church leaders challenge our people, inspire our people to not have the whole secular, sacred, false dichotomy, but to see what the Lord's given them as far as their craft, how the faith impacts that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it takes some intentionality, obviously. I think part of the intentionality for a pastor is to not train laymen to be elders, right? Like, I think that's the mentality, is you're training all the laymen to be you instead of training them to be missionaries in culture. Now, there's obviously a contingent you need to train up to be elders, and you want them to be competent in the scriptures and so on and so forth. But I think you want to equip them biblically and spiritually for them to go out and affect the world that they exist in. And so you don't just simply want to replicate your role as an equipper, but you want to help them wrestle through some of the tough questions that they're going to have and some of the issues that they're going to have. If you're an actor, can you kiss this woman in the scene? Can you not if you're married? How does that work? If you're a doctor, what are the moral stipulations for this particular situation that you're in? And so just helping them walk through and navigate how to be effective in culture, and to see every opportunity as an opportunity for ministry. And so, I remember working at a call center, and I saw that as a ministry. I saw helping people get out of debt instead of just trying to collect their money as a ministry opportunity. That's serving these people. And, I think that's beneficial. I think that as Christians, we have that unique ability to selflessly serve people and hopefully push them toward the gospel.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, man, Ed and I would like to, and we'll also ask all the viewers to as well, pray for you, because we're grateful for you and how the Lord's using you. And what can we pray for you about?
Well, we already talked about it. It's you hear it on all sides, and it's definitely a unique and lonely road. I think one thing is definitely just family, especially for myself and all the artists who are treading in some unique ground and territory, and we haven't had a lot of models for what it looks like to be fathers or husbands, and so we have to read books, and we have to hang around older, wiser guys, and so we're just trying to figure this thing out as we move along, and we're all new fathers and not so seasoned husbands, and so we want to be well-rounded in our character, not just what we do on stage.
That's great, man. Yeah. Well, I'd like to invite everybody who's watching. I'm going to lead us in a closing time of prayer for Lecrae and invite you to join me now in praying for Lecrae. God, thank you so much for this man, for his ministry, for what you're doing in his heart as he impacts culture. Lord, thank you that he's willing to live in this holy tension of being in the world but not being of the world, of impacting those around him by loving those around him, but yet simultaneously listening to you and speaking for you. Lord, I do pray that you would protect him, protect his heart, keep his heart focused on you, Lord. Keep him to yourself. I pray for his 3 children, for his wife, Lord, that you would cause him by your grace to be the husband and the father that you're calling him to be. And for all of the men on his record label, Lord, I pray the same for them, that you would continually empower them to walk this journey well and to influence the culture well for your sake and in your name. Lord, I pray for the concerts and the tour that he's on now. Lord, I pray in your grace and your mercy you'd reach out and you would grab hearts and change hearts through the lyrics that you've given him. Lord, use him continually as a missionary in this culture. Thank you so much. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Man, thanks for the time.
Hey, pleasure.
Appreciate it, man. Seriously.